Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this final day of NASIG 2025. I'm Jen Leffler. I am excited to be the moderator for this presentation today, Visualizing Open Access at Emory University and Emory Libraries. Our speakers today are Chris and Doug, and I will leave it to them.
Thank you so much, Jen. Again, my name is Chris Palazzolo. I'm the Director of Collections and Open Strategies here at Emory University in already very humid Atlanta, Georgia. This is my colleague, Doug Slaughter. He is our collections analyst. And we are going to present today on visualizing open access at Emory University and Emory Libraries, a project that we've been working on to create a dashboard about open access support that the libraries here at Emory support, and making that available to stakeholders and to others to kind of see where our authors are publishing open access, how much we're spending on that open access, and how we can, and where they are. So I'm going to just move along, and we will also have some stills and some slides to show you that, plus a video that we won't show during this presentation, but that you can watch at your own leisure later. So first of all, it's going to do a little bit of a brief overview of kind of support at the Emory University Libraries. And the Emory University Libraries, just so that you know, report to a university librarian and report to a vice provost of libraries and museum. And under the university librarian is the health sciences library, the Woodruff Library, and our special collections library, as well as some smaller libraries, the business and music and media library. And that's important because health sciences has a disproportionate number of titles in our Gold Open LA dashboard and have been a big partner in this. Scholarly Communication is another big collaborator we've had in this process as well. Just want to make that little shout out there. So in terms of the support that we have, these are just two screenshots of 2 pages that we have up, and I'll go a little bit more detail as to what these actually are. There's a read and publish, APC free publishing, we call it, at Emory webpage that we have been putting together since about 2022, ever since we had our first transformative agreement. And there's also an open access publishing fund. And you'll notice for right now that the open access publishing fund has a big banner on the top of that, meaning mostly that because of some budget constraints this year, which is probably not uncommon amongst viewers and attendees today, that we are having to make a few changes. So we've actually not sunsetted the program, but also just put a hold on it for a little while. But a little bit more details about this. It's a transformative agreement. So I won't go. This is not a presentation about transformative agreements or read and publish, but this is, but just to give you an idea of who we have and when these have started. You'll see here the list of those. Everything from Cambridge to ACM. We are, open to other ones right now, but these are the ones we've had for the longest. And then Open Access Publishing Fund. We've had this for quite some time, for about 13 years now. And the award amount actually has increased over the years as article processing charges have increased, but it is a maximum of $1,500. No other grant funding available, kind of a fund of last resort, and only Gold OA, not hybrid journals, for example. And like I said, it's on hold currently due to some budget constraints. So those kind of 2 big financial supports, either indirectly or directly, that we are providing to Emory researchers in their publishing and publishing open access. So moving ahead, kind of what the genesis and the why we're trying to create this, the goals and the objectives. So I'm going to let Doug talk a little bit about kind of what led us to this project and kind of what we're trying to accomplish with the project.
Sure. What was the impetus behind developing a dashboard around Gold Open Access? And really, it stemmed from wanting to be able to tell a story. We know that we do, we're plugged in and contribute a lot to Gold Open Access. It's one of our priorities, but we wanted to figure out what the story is. And so conversations around that coalesced around three broad goals. The first was to broadly characterize Emory's contribution to Gold Open Access. What does that look like across departments? With whom? The second was to visualize the cost of gold open access at Emory and what the expenditures look like over time. And then we didn't want this just to be specific to Emory. So the third goal was to document this process so that it could be developed into a model that could be adapted or used by other institutions. And so the objectives revolve around that. So, we wanted to understand and highlight our the read and publish contributions. Chris mentioned that, we have transformative agreements with Cambridge University Press, Royal Society of Chemistry, so on and so forth. What role does that play in the overall picture? We wanted to estimate the cost of open access for the authors at our institution, regardless of funding sources. So whether those dollars come from institutional funds or if they pass through the institution because they're funded with soft dollars by various grants. We wanted all of that to be a part of the picture. Next, we wanted to figure out the role that the OAPF, the Open Access Publishing Fund, contributes to that story. Chris mentioned that that's been in place since 2013, and we wanted to be able to characterize the role that that's played in our open access story. Next, we wanted to demonstrate where open access was happening at Emory. So that includes subject areas, disciplines, publishers, journals, so on and so forth. We wanted to document the changes in open access over time, whether we were increasing every year, or whether if there needed to be pullbacks, what that looked like, and then to understand the choices, the strengths and limitations that come with choosing potential data sources and making choices and optimizing that for our purposes.
Thanks, Doug. So now we'll move a little more into the mechanics and the components of the OA dashboard. And I'll tease Doug to say that we have lovingly called this kind of our Frankenstein data set to a certain extent because we have pulled from a lot of different sources in order to build this. And in doing so, we've had to make a good number of decisions. And we'll talk about the decisions and caveats around the data in the subsequent slides. But just to know kind of what we've used as part of this. So really our kind of core data is really the Web of Science data, all right? Articles with Emory affiliations over the time period of 2019 to 2023. And we include all fields available to us um, in Web of Science. We had to do a lot of filtering here because, of course, Web of Science includes a lot of other things about conference reports, proceedings, and so forth. We really limited this just to what they defined as articles. We then had to really add a number of data sources to that based on a number of match points, oftentimes the DOI, for example, or sometimes just manually putting in the data. And so the data that we incorporated in was, of course, master data we have from our Scholar Communication Office, who manages our open access publishing fund and provides all the information about article titles, authors, affiliations, the actual total cost of APCs, how much we spent on them, whether or not they've been actually expended, published, all that information. We're looking at easier ways in the future of making that more easily accessible and also more easily mergeable, I guess, if that's a word, together. So that comes there. We also used a lot of data from the Copyright Clearance Center, which has of course a platform for managing open access agreements that authors will oftentimes pass through, and also gives us good aggregate statistics. But of course, that doesn't cover everything because of obviously different publisher preferences and how they manage their open access or their transformative agreements. So we did have to go to individual reports from those individual publishers. We also used insights because we really needed a way to consistently identify Emory corresponding authors, right? Which is one of the bigger concerns, of course, as we know. I know there are a lot of work being done on trying to align and trying to normalize author affiliations. But we were really concerned about Emory's corresponding authors. Of course, we include any article that Emory was involved in, even if it wasn't a corresponding author. But we wanted some way to kind of look at what Emory's contribution specifically was to it. And we know this is not a perfect measure, but we at least wanted to be consistent. And we used Insights, which the Emory Libraries currently subscribe to, as the basis for that. We use Delta Think, Delta Think's tool we subscribe to that gives us APCs over time. And they've done a lot of work in scoping and in going across many a website and pulling and scraping data about prices that different publishers and different journals within the same publisher portfolio are charging. So we got that. And of course, that is not so much dated as it needs to be updated every once in a while. So, and also there are titles that are not included or because they're not trying to do every single journal. They're trying to do as many as they can. So we did have to supplement with individual publisher data on APCs, and we try to get as close as we could to the fee paid in that year. All right, but then that leads me to some caveats. And as anybody who's working in OA and working in APCs and so forth know that this is a complex environment and ecosystem in which to find yourself, and that there's so many variations and there are many data sources from which to choose or to select your data from. And we did look at a number of them. We did look at OpenAlex, and we don't have in terms of our capacity, we weren't really able to maintain pulling data from OpenAlex in a consistent fashion or easily for us. We also consider dimensions. The universities, I believe the Office of Research Administration has a license for dimensions too, but it was difficult to parse out data on corresponding authors, and also it always didn't consistently match with a lot of our other data so that we are keeping locally. So this is why we went to Web of Science, and we are very well aware that Web of Science is not 100% accurate in terms of its coverage of publishers. We found a number of publishers, journals from Cambridge, for example, that were not included or not indexed in Web of Science. So that is something we do know and we are well aware of. We had to remove conference proceedings and book chapters, so forth. And then we looked at subject categories split into principal and supplemental classifications. You can get really granular in Web of Science, of course, and how they classify titles. We did have to parse that out a little bit to create some basic classifications, but also to allow for supplemental information, so you get a little more granular. I'm not going to go too much in detail about this, but we did make the decisions around how we looked at funding. We did for this particular pilot of the project. We did not go into specific funders. We just looked at funding 1 or 0. We're only including Gold Open Access titles. We know, of course, there's many a variety or flavor of open access. We try to be a little bit more focused, although we do have that data, which we could use a little bit more if we want to look at green or bronze versions. And also, of course, I mentioned before that APCs are notoriously difficult to track down and measure the exact number unless you really go down to your institution's financial ledgers and try to find that information there. So there may be waivers, discounts, all the sort of stuff, which we know, or maybe overcounting or overestimating a little bit the amount spent on APCs. So this is where I put this little thing in bold at the bottom here as like the big caveat. We're really looking at patterns, and we're looking at kind of round figures rather than looking for complete accuracy. So we're not looking for $273,274 as being the gospel of money spent on APCs. That's an estimate. And we're also just looking at changes over time, but also just kind of getting a picture as to Doug's point, kind of the story that we're trying to tell here is not meant to have every detail and every fact perfectly fact checked. It's meant to be, again, more of a broad paintbrush. We would like to improve that, of course, over time, but that's kind of where we are with the data sources that we have and the caveats that are incorporated into this data set. So a couple things, data exceptions. We have a couple of other initiatives going on at Emory around open access. So we have one for digital publishing in the humanities, which is done through our Fox Center, which allows for faculty to provide to get pardon me to get out I forgot the exact amount is right this moment, but to get funding for publishing digital monograph open access digital monographs in the humanities. And we would like to include that because that is finished support, but it's not directly from the libraries. It's from Emory College. So we want to keep this specific to the libraries, although we are in discussions to potentially include this data in future iterations. And we also did include citation data right now because we're trying to get a snapshot here, and we didn't want to have to continually update the data. Right now, we didn't have a way to consistently do that or do that in an easy fashion right now to refresh the data rather than just on an annual basis. So for right now, we're not looking at how much our authors publishing Gold Open Access are being cited, although it's a very interesting discussion about whether or not those are getting more citations and in what fields and so forth and so on. There's a lot of ideas around trying to manage that and actually normalize those patterns and so forth. So we look at that in a different data set at a different time. And so finally, before I hand it over to Doug to show you the tool itself, this is simply just a snapshot right now. I call this kind of the general statistics reporting. And these numbers are, like I mentioned before, are not the gospel. They are subject to change as we look at some data cleanup and a few discrepancies that we've had, and we've already noticed a bit. So as part of doing a little bit of quality assurance and quality control. But you can see here the number of, open access, gold open access articles by Emory corresponding authors. With about 30% of all articles published here at Emory, which is, we don't have a comparative term here in terms of other universities or libraries or institutions. I would love to have that to kind of see. And I do think that data will be pretty easy to get through insights and through other sources. So it'd be interesting to compare what our performance, quote unquote, is here. You can look at our OAPF expenditures, how much we've spent on the OAPF fund over the years. This is just flat expenditures. So you can see it's quite a lot of money overall. And that all comes out of the collections budget, just so you know. It's not a separate budget, our operational budget. So we are supporting this through collections. And you can see the annual APC spend by Emory corresponding author over our time. So there's the average of $2,540 APC spent, and we lot. And then you see our transformative agreement savings, and that's a good another estimate that we have there about how much we're actually that has researchers are not having to pay out of grant funds or other research funds or other sources. So that's enough of me talking about the background and the kind of setup for this. I'm going to hand it to Doug to provide a little bit more and give you some visualizations from it. So here we go.
Thanks, Chris. I'm gonna turn off my camera to make sure that I don't cut out as I'm talking, because I'll talk forever and I won't even realize you can't hear me. So as Chris mentioned, there's a video that it's about 12 minutes that walks through the dashboard, the features, and the functionality, the different combinations of views that's available for you to watch at your leisure when you have time. But trying to do a live demonstration on Zoom is quite a disaster. So we opted to make that available to you all, and instead decided to include some stills from the dashboard to talk through some of the functionality and features of the dashboard. So this first view are some of the beginning tabs, some of the earlier tabs in the dashboard, and it's really just meant to highlight the scope of what we're trying to drill down into and examine. There's green open access, so on and so forth, but we opt, and that's an enormous amount of data. And Chris mentioned that we have kind of a Frankenstein data set pulled from a lot of different sources. And so we decided to focus in trying to tell the gold open access story. And so this early view is meant to just show you what that looks like in context. what the overall spend in terms of APC looks like in context of the overall open access story, and what in terms of the amount of articles that are published in Gold Open Access in the context of the overall story. That's what's intended to be illustrated in these early uh, uh, dash tabs on the dashboard. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris also mentioned that we wanted to be able to fairly reliably identify for what publications an Emory author was the corresponding author. And the reason behind that was to better understand the role of Emory's involvement in open access and Gold Open Access in the context of the larger community. Our researchers, our scientists don't do their work in a vacuum, right? They do their work with partner institutions at peer universities and other community organizations. And so we realized that not only articles and spin wherein an Emory author was the corresponding author is part of this story, and we wanted to be able to capture that. So this also in part shows the scope of the dashboard and the discussion what we decided to dig into in the dashboard, but that scope is important. So also this shows on the right side, which you'll see more of, a couple of the filters and the features that allow us to drill down into the data. So and we'll get more into that, but from the left side to the right side, you can see that if we care to see for a given subset of journals or publishers, what the breakdown looked like in terms of where an Emory author was a corresponding author and where it was not. We can subset the data in that way with the dashboard that we built out in Tableau. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned filtering, and that's important. That was an important aspect of us being able to make this relatable and useful for the many stakeholders that are part of the community. So in this, just to orient you, if you look at just the left view where it says publisher level article counts, in the top part of the frame, there are those bars. Those bars correspond to the different publishers that are a part of our master data set, we'll call it. And at the bottom, you'll see a table, right? Those tables, the tables on each of the subsequent views show you the individual articles at the article level that are comprised within this top view. And so if you care to know, which articles were a part of this count in Frontiers or Wiley or Elsevier, you would see the list of those titles at the bottom. And again, on the right, you have the breakdown, the filtering options where you can subset by publication year, publisher, journal, whether or not the Emory author was the corresponding author, whether a title was part of a reading publish agreement, or whether publishing the article was funded through grant dollars. And so on the right, it just shows an example of how the view changes based on the choices you might make. So if you wanted to just subset the view to 2 years within the 5-year range that we are looking at in this data set for now, from 2019 to 2023, if we decided we wanted to just look at publisher article level counts for 2022 and 2021, we could do so, and we could see dynamically how those counts change and how the total APC cost or burden would change accordingly. And so these views are available at the publisher level, but also the journal level. So next slide. So in the previous slide, I showed you publisher views and article counts, but there are also publisher views that have APC totals. And this is an example of the journal level views of those APC totals, right? Similarly, we have journal level views of article counts. But for this example, we just wanted to show that we could also look at this with the focus on journals. So in the left view, you'll see the journal of abbreviations in that top view, and the associated would be the associated APC cost on the right end of those bars. At the bottom, you'll still see that table of APC costs, associated APC costs for the individual article, and then on the right, the same filtering. And there's this famous saying by a statistician. His name is George Box. He said, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." And I think Chris kind of alluded to that when he mentioned that the focus here was not that over 5 years the total spend given our certain filters was $21,823,361, right? The point was to be able to identify reliable trends, regardless of whether the amount is off by $1 or $100 or so on, and we're able to see that in these data. So on the right hand side, you can see that in addition to selecting the filters on the right, you just look at the data by a certain year or select collection of years. If you wanted to investigate further, well, what articles comprise this $1.5 million spend with Nature? You could select the bar itself at the top, and at the bottom you'll see the articles that comprise that the spend related to that particular journal. Next slide. Chris also mentioned that part of the story was the role of the Open Access Publishing Fund, and really this working with the folks that steward this fund and their efforts was part of the impetus for all of this to begin with. And so we wanted to be able to tell that story in this dashboard as well. And so the structure is similar, and at the top you can see spend overall, and in the green you can see for a given selection of years for certain journals and publishers, whichever you decide to select, you can see the total APC cost for that period. And if this is a still, so it doesn't do it, but if you mouse over, those total costs pop up in a little toolbox when you hover over it. And then also in that same view, the amount that the Open Access Publishing Fund has contributed to meeting the burden, that cost burden for a particular journal, is shown in orange. And so this gives a very practical view, a practical way of understanding what the fund has done over time, at the journal level, but we also have views at the publisher level in order to better understand the story. At the bottom, you see a similar table, right, with the APC cost at the article level at the bottom on the far right, but then you also see the amount that the OAPF has contributed in or for a given article in that same table. All right, next slide. We also wanted to see what the discipline specific contributions were for Gold Open Access, and there are different ways to do this. We chose to leverage the discipline, the subject fields that are in the Web of Science data. And I think there are 7 or 10 levels of category, but for our purposes, we stopped at 3. And at the bottom, just to orient you, you'll see in that similar table format, the first column is the Web of Science principal category, and then you see the second and the third, and you see a bunch of nulls there. And that's because data aren't perfect, and there are many instances where just the principal category is what's entered into the record. But there are instances where more detail is warranted, right? So for immunology, maybe they wanted to also specify that this is related to infectious disease, and within infectious disease microbiology. So we wanted to be able to capture that. And so at the top, we have the principal categories, the hierarchical categories, and are able to see the article counts for these principal categories. And if we wanted, we can hover over and click within that view to expand and see where, for example, within oncology, is more of the gold open access publishing being done, and further investigate that. And this, you don't see that here, you don't see here, but I happen to know that when you expand oncology, you see that a lot of the second level categories, second level publishing is in the radiology category, surgery. And so that's all part of the story. We wanted to be able to capture that without overwhelming anyone with the data. So this kind of functionality, expanding and drilling down as we choose, allows us to do that without overwhelming any of our stakeholders with data. And the same filtering appears on the right side if we wanted to look at particular years, particular publishers, particular journals. Next slide. And so the last set of stills I'll show is just the forest, right? Try not to lose the forest for the trees. Some of the views toward the tail end of the dashboard let us zoom out and see what the trends look like over time, not just for the Open Access Publishing Fund, but for Gold Open Access at Emory overall. And you can see not all of the filters are available on the right side, and that's by design, because being a Frankenstein data set, you want to make sure that what you derive from a view is reliable, and so that translates into whether or not it's appropriate to include drilling down further into some aspects of the data versus not. And this is where it was appropriate, but it's still useful. So being able to determine, well, what does the spend look like over time for a particular publisher or a particular journal? Those filters are available. And one that's not available in some of the other views is looking at the trends, the trend over time by discipline. And so, that's an interesting view that was brought up by some of our stakeholders, that they care to know what this looks like over time for you know, for they wanted to see discipline specific views. So on the right side, on the left is the spend overall in corporate, but on the right side, you can see at the top what it looks like for cardiac and cardiovascular focused articles, and at the bottom, what it looks like for oncology focused articles. So this is an overview of some of the functionality that we found useful in our approach to be able to tell the story of Emory Gold Open Access, and some of the combinations of views that our folks found useful. So back to you, Chris, to wrap us up and tell us about future directions and iterations of this project.
Thank you. And so, yes, I will end our oops, didn't do that. Our presentation. So this is kind of what we are planning to do with the data set, and a future things we'd like to see possibly added. So as you noted, this was only 5 years of data, 2019 through 2023. So we would definitely like to expand. And the idea here was to create a bit of a framework data-wise and visualization-wise before we added more data in, because we didn't want to make it a big, huge process every single time we wanted to add annual data in. So we made a lot of decisions at the upfront, and then we'll be more easily able to incorporate additional data. We're also going to be utilizing data to look at more AR&P arrangements and update those arrangements as well. Oops, pardon me. As well. We're going to be looking at, we're going to utilize some of the data in here actually to start looking at whether or not we want to expand some of our R&P arrangements. So another reason why we want to do this is to kind of look at where our folks are publishing open access right now and where they're not getting funded or not having their fees paid for or accounted for. Share further with some university stakeholders, and then potentially include data and digital humanities content. We also have an instance of Dataverse as well for data. And even though it is not something that's funded by the libraries in terms of, because it's open access data, doesn't have a APC cost associated with it, we would like to monitor how many people are actually using Dataverse and so forth as part of open access. So going beyond the article container and moving to other containers and other types of open data, which are being required by agencies, particularly for the Nelson Memo and others. So this is, we'll share the slides out if interested. This is the demo video that Doug spoke of. It's about 12 minutes long, so thanks to him for assembling this. So you can see it live in living color and see some of those times when you can actually hover over some of the figures and charts and bar charts, et cetera, to see some of the actual underlying data for that. And we'll end with a big thank you. And I want to thank Doug in particular. He is our Tableau master. I provide a lot of assistance in data and in background, and also but he really helps in terms of the getting things looking pretty and also wrangling a lot of the data in such a way. So kudos to Doug for helping me out in this kind of long-standing project. And to our SCARTA communications office, who provide a lot of the data for us as well. So I'm going to stop sharing there. I think we have a few minutes for any questions that might come, or anything that wants any clarifications on. So.
Thank you, Doug and Chris. So participants, attendees, we welcome your questions. I'm happy to read them out as they come in for the two of you. While we're waiting for those, can you share with us some of the stakeholders that have seen this data and the feedback or how it's been used?
Sure. So the main stakeholders that we've shared it with are SCARTA Communication, since this was a product coming out of a lot of their data. And we have an open access librarian who actually manages, like I mentioned before, the open access publishing fund. So she was definitely very interested in that. And also seeing kind of views. And also they were good data checks to see kind of we noticed that a mistake in some of our publishing fund data, and which we won't correct. We've also shared it with our head of research and engagement and scholarly communication, which is the AUL for that area, as well as with our assessment librarian. our head of assessment, who is relatively new, to whom Doug reports, and looking and seeing information there. We would like to present this a little bit outside of here to maybe research administration and to a few other outside the library stakeholders, because we're really trying to make a case here about what the library is doing and how much money we're spending. On
Yeah.
how much money your researchers are spending on these sorts of things. I mean, that's more the story for them as well to get maybe in a very bad budget year. We may not be able to win that, but I think awareness is extremely important to know how much of this is being, funded out of grants and so forth, soft money, et cetera. So that's why we like to go outside the library, kind of one of the big next steps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any questions?
If not, that's okay too. Mind no questions. But if you do, you have our contact information here as well. And are these recorded and shared?
Yep, they're recorded. They will be posted on the SCED.
Okay,
Um,
awesome.
so
And slides are made available also
yes,
to
yep.
attendees. Okay.
And so
Yeah,
those
so
of
the
us
link,
that,
the link out to the demo.
yep, will be there. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All
Great.
right. Thank you both so much for your presentation. I learned a
Oh,
lot. And everyone, thank you for coming.
I think there's a question that
Oh,
just came
Oh, real
through.
quick, what do
shoot,
we use
shoot,
to create
shoot.
the
Oh,
dashboard? Tableau is our main.
Sure. So yes, so Tableau, to create the visuals, Tableau. Oh, the slides are on no sketch.
Oh,
Okay.
we haven't. Yeah, well, we haven't submitted them yet. So yeah.
Okay, we'll make sure that we do so. But to create the dashboard, we that was built in Tableau, but the data come from a ton of different sources, and certainly made their way through Excel and different data washing tools. There's also a tool that I like a lot called Tableau Data Prep, which allows you to create like a cleaning flow so that things are cleaned in the same way and processed in the same way every time. So that was also a part of this process. Given the different sources, we wanted to make sure that we were consistent and could be consistent moving forward. So that's a plug. That's a plug for those tools.
You can be their spokesperson for those. And who do we send the slides to? I'm sorry, I should ask that question. Do we send the slides to you, Jen, or do we send it to somebody else? I can't remember.
to CPC, I can look it up, and since I
Oh,
have your email, I can tell you who on the
okay.
committee will get
Okay.
those. Yeah,
Sounds good.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. Sorry,
You
we
bet.
forgot to do
No,
that.
there are other things to worry about at this point.
All right. Well, thanks,
All
everyone.
right,
We
everyone.
are very, very, very happy that you attended the discussion. If you have further questions, we're more than happy to talk to you individually about those. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.